sometimes you have people that have popular songs that are good, and then you listen to all of their other music, and it's like markedly worse. And it's like, how do you account for that? They had a moment of inspiration or transcendence, and it just came out of I don't know. But I was thinking, well, maybe I'm one of those guys. Maybe I just had this one moment, and I think what I'm doing now is good, but maybe I'm crazy.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Field Tripping. Today, we're joined by a Grammy-nominated singer-songwriter, poet, and record producer, amongst other things. You may know him from his breakout record, Cooler Than Me, or his hit, I Took a Pill in Ibiza. But we're here today to get a better understanding of the man behind the music, Mike Posner. Mike isn't shy about speaking out on the importance of mental health and has incorporated many wellness practices into his everyday life, including the Wim Hof breathing method, of which he is a certified instructor. In a world of egos and icons that is much of the music industry, it's admirable to see such an influential person be so real about mental health. Mike, thanks so much for joining us today. Are you ready to go field tripping?
I'm ready to go field tripping. Thank you for having me on.
Awesome. All right. So we're going to start by playing a game, something we've never done before on the podcast. And it's in honor of your first. It's an honor of your first hit, Cooler Than Me. And Conrad is going to be our judge on who has done the cooler thing. The prize is only mutual admiration, but are you ready?
I am ready.
All right. First question, you answer, then I'll answer. What is the coolest thing you've ever done?
Summited Mount Everest.
That is pretty cool. I will give you that. I would say the coolest thing I've ever done was opening the NASDAQ when Field Trip listed on the exchange back. I guess we listed last July or something like that. But it was pretty friggin' cool to be opening and seeing our logo and our team up on the billboard in Times Square. So, all right, first question. Conrad, who's the winner on that one?
Congratulations.
Actually, save it to the end. Save it to the end. We'll just tally it up. Okay. Who is the most interesting person you've ever had dinner with?
Wow. Interesting person had dinner with. Gosh. You go first. I'm still thinking.
All right. It was Robin Leach from Lifestyles of the Rich and the Famous, that TV show from the 80s. He was at a dinner I was at. I sat across from him. So Robin Leach is the most interesting.
It was like up close and personal with Robin Leach. I'm in a far from cheap. I spent this with my peeps all day. Spread love. It's the Brooklyn way. And Alizé keep you fit. That Robin Leach?
I don't think that Robin Leach. He was like, I don't know. Did he record a song? Maybe he did, but he was the host of the TV show.
Perhaps referencing him.
That Robin Leach, yes. That's probably I think there's only one Robin Leach. It actually
perhaps segues into my answer. My answer, I'm going to pick Grandmaster Flash. I sat next to him at a dinner once, and he was explaining to me, we were at this fancy dinner that was honoring Jay-Z. And Grandmaster Flash is, of course, one of not the first DJ ever, but amongst the first and most influential DJs in early hip hop. And he was telling me he was the first guy to put the same record on both turntables. And he would find a 4-bar loop, or it wasn't even a loop yet, a 4-bar section of the record that they called the break. And he'd play it on one record, and he'd tee up it on the other one, and he'd flip it over, and he'd play the same section, and then go back and forth. So essentially you were hearing what became a loop. And he could play this one 4-bar section of music forever. And I said, how long did you, from when you made that innovation to when anyone rapped ever, how long was it? And he said 4 years. So I said, if you never figured out that, there would have never been a Jay-Z, never been a Biggie Smalls, never been Kendrick Lamar. And he said no. And of course, it was these loops that people began, just sort of shouting on the mic, keeping the party going. We call it emceeing. And then making up little rhymes, and that became the entire media and art form of rapping. And so that was a pretty cool dinner.
All right. Well, I'm going to give you that one off the bat. No, you don't even have to judge.
It's Conrad's choice.
All right. Next question. What's the most romantic thing you've ever done?
Gosh, I would be giving up all my tricks.
Secret? Yeah.
Yeah, my secrets. Man, it's so personal. I had I was dating a wonderful woman once she was into horses, horseback riding, and in particular, there's one trainer, and this infamous horse trainer, and I somehow tracked this guy down and blindfolded her and drove her there, and then took the blindfold off, and he was there, and it was a whole thing. That was pretty cool.
Oh, that's awesome. I like that story. That's very thoughtful. I'm gonna take a cue right out of the wedding book, but my wife Stephanie and I, our first trip was to Curacao, and we had an amazing time. And probably were in love with each other prior to that trip, but it was pretty awesome. 4 years later, when we went back to Curacao and actually got married in front of all of our friends, including getting married by a good friend of mine who's the most atheist Mormon priest you'll ever meet. But it was a very romantic experience. It was actually under a full moon, coincidentally, which was super cool as well. So I would say
you win.
Getting married. Thank you. But it's Conrad's choice.
You haven't done that yet. I haven't done the married part yet.
You got time, my friend. You got time. The world is your oyster. Unless you do more of the next question, which is what is the most dangerous thing you've ever done other than getting bitten by a rattlesnake in Colorado?
Also summiting Mount Everest, without question.
For sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. Without
look forward
a doubt.
to hearing that. Probably the most dangerous thing I've done was falling out of a tree when I was 15 from about 30 feet up. I'm probably only alive because my left butt cheek hit the ground before my head smacked a branch a few inches off the ground. Or mountain biking down Yungas Road in Bolivia. I don't know if you know Yungas Road in Bolivia, but if you see the pictures of it, it's one of those roads that are about 6 feet wide, maybe 8 feet wide. On one side, there's a mountain. On the other side, there's 1,000-foot drop cliff, and trucks pass each other on this road. It's very harrowing, and riding down on a mountain bike was a hell of a lot of fun. But at one point, I let myself go too fast, hit the brakes, and fishtailed perilously close to the edge of those cliffs. And that's probably one of the most dangerous things I've ever done. Which dovetails nicely into this next question. What's the dumbest thing you've ever done?
Also summiting Mount Everest. It checks a lot of boxes, that experience.
It sure does. I look forward to hearing more about that. And I have a lot of questions about it. For me, certainly mountain biking and skydiving and all that kind of stuff is really dumb. But I'll tell you what probably felt like the dumbest thing I've ever done, which was when I was an articling student working at a big law firm in Toronto. We started playing this game that every day there was an email that went out to the entire firm about all the new matters that the firm had initiated representation on. And it meant nothing to us articling students. It was kind of annoying. So we started this joke of trying to forward the email to all of our friends being like, look at the exciting news. And whoever got the email out to everybody else first used to claim spoils for being the first to do it. But it was usually framed as spoils, insert expletive here, as a term of endearment to our friends. And so one time I did that. It was like in the last 2 weeks of my articling year. So I'm right at the end and I haven't been fired. And instead of forwarding it to my friend,
haven't been fired
to the entire firm. And I just remember hitting send and then feeling my whole body wilt, being like, oh my God, I just sent an email to the entire firm that says spoils bitches. and I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to get fired 2 weeks before the end of my articling firm and before the end of my articling year. And then the smallest of miracles happened is I got a bounce back because I guess the firm finally got smart enough from enough people replying all to the message that it didn't go to everybody. You had to have certain access to email the entire firm, which I didn't. So I got a bounce back and no one was any the wiser, but God, I felt really dumb in that moment. All right. Final question. How much do any of those things that I just asked you about matter for who you want to be in the future?
I would say little to none, only in the context of in moments of weakness that you can draw and remember times where you felt weakness before and overcame that. So for me, we talked about Mount Everest, mentioned already 3 times. That was certainly, the hardest thing I've done. And so it isn't who I am and doesn't earn me any points in the present moment. But in challenging times is something I can refer back to and go, hey, remember you did that? You could probably handle this too. So I would say only in that context and in none other.
100%. And that's exactly it, which is, I found myself, I don't know, in an emotionally challenging period over the last 2 weeks. And as I was driving to work today and came up with this idea and started thinking about what answers I'd come up with, it was a good lift, a reminder of the things I have accomplished. And so it stands there as just a reminder. But, I certainly hope to be romantic going forward. I hope to be less dumb. I probably won't do as many dangerous things, but it's nice to have those all in my belt and in my at least mental photo bank, so I can look back at them and to remind myself of what this life has actually been, even in times of feeling bleak. So thank you for playing the first ever game of Who's Cooler, inspired by your song "Cooler Than Me." That was awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh yeah, it's judgment time. Sorry, I forgot. We actually have a prize of mutual admiration.
I'll go backwards. So from the dumbest thing you ever done, between climbing Mount Everest from Mike, replying all as you're an intern, Ronan, that's pretty dumb, and I think a lot of people relate to that. So you're gonna get the dumbest award for that.
Yes.
Question number 4, which was the most dangerous thing you did. We got Mike saying Everest and you falling out of a tree. Unfortunately, I think for you, Ronan, it's going to be Everest. It's going to take that one for sure. Very dangerous, very perilous. For question number 3, the most romantic, between surprising your girlfriend with a horseback trainer she'd always want to meet and kind of getting married under the sun of your favorite vacation destination. And we're gonna say that one's probably the winner, Ronan. Marriage kind of trumps it all. For question number 2, around who you've the most famous person you had dinner with.
Most interesting.
Most interesting.
Not famous. Yes.
Not famous. Right. Interesting. So we had Grandmaster Flash and
Robin Leach.
Had Robin Leach of the Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous. I think that's correct. We're going to go with the Grandmaster on that one.
Oh, yes.
Had such a big impact. I think that's the winner. So now we're down to our final question. We're at a tie here. We got 2-2. So to our very first question, which was...
What's the coolest thing you've ever done?
What's the coolest thing you ever done? We got a NASDAQ opening, which is pretty cool and impactful. And we got climbing Mount Everest. And I think by hair, Everest is going to take this one.
Oh, there you go.
So,
well, congratulations.
We got a winner.
You've won my admiration.
You've won mine as well.
Awesome. So I do want to talk about Everest, but before we get there, maybe it's easiest to go in chronological order. So I'm just going to read the question I wrote down, which is, at least based on what I've seen in the public record, because you are quite a public figure, I truly do find your life fascinating. Permit me to explain a little bit. Growing up, I had 3 key ambitions. First was to play in the NBA, which dream died around the age of 15 when I realized that my Jewish genetics rendered that dream all but impossible. Second was to be a musician. I played in a few bands in high school, including the short-lived act of Ronan and the Gentiles, but my lack of rhythm and tone made that a little stretch too far. It was actually a band. As a side note, my grandmother could sing, but she came from the Bloom side of the family, where clearly my musical ability came from the Levy side of the family. And as a random story, my grandmother in her later years suffered from Alzheimer's, and toward the end of her life, she became largely nonverbal. I'll never forget the last words she said to me. I went to visit her, and she was resting on my grandfather's shoulders. She stirred, she looked up at me, and all she said was, "Where's your hair?" and then went back to lying on my shoulder. And those were the last words that my grandmother ever said to me. So a very, very stark memory of the only musical side of my family. And my third goal was to become a lawyer, which goal I accomplished, but it turns out it sucked pretty bad. All that's to say, you've seemingly had some incredible ups and downs in your life, and I'd love to hear about your path and what put you on the path to music and where you are today. And I've got a whole bunch of notes about some of the things that I think are interesting, but I'll let you tell the story, and then I'll pipe in with questions where further curious.
Sure. I mean, where should I start? At the beginning? We could be here all day.
Start at, maybe going to Duke, which is a great school. And what took you to Duke? What was your aspiration there? And how did a life of music and beyond emerge from that experience?
Sure. Actually, I'll go just 2 months before I got to Duke University. I had an internship in Detroit at the hip hop radio station, Hot 102.7. And I ended up meeting a young artist there named Sean. And we sort of became buddies. He let me become a part of his crew. He was a rapper, and I started to do beats for him. And I had already gained admission to Duke University. So that September, or probably late August, I went down to North Carolina, left Detroit. But my relationship with Sean maintained. So while I was in my dorm room, I had this little keyboard set up and some software I had pirated off the internet, and I was making beats and recording songs into a cheap microphone when the other kids would go out to party. So dorm rooms, as you can imagine, are quite loud, but there was always this sweet spot from, I don't know, 11 p.m. to 2:30 a.m. when people would actually go out, either parties or bars. And before those things closed and they returned, it would get loud again. It was quiet from 11:30 to 2. So I could write songs all day, but in that little opening, that window, I would record music. And much of it I would send to Sean, and a lot of it sort of became my own music. Then while I was at Duke, he signed a record deal, and the world sort of knows Sean now by his stage name, Big Sean. But something sort of changed when he signed the recording contract. It made the prospect of me becoming an artist believable in my own mind. Before that point, music was something I loved and I knew I would do the rest of my life, but I sort of believed I would have a quote unquote normal job and I would do that on the side because, becoming a recording artist is 1 in a million. And then after Sean got his record deal, it no longer occurred internally to me as 1 in a million, but 1 in 2. And I went from believing, that probably would never happen to this is going to happen. And I'm going to make it happen. And once that internal shift took place inside me, to where I actually believed, I was going to get a record deal too, it was only about 6 or 8 months that it actually did. And I started putting music out from my dorm room, and the song you referenced in our intro, Cooler Than Me, was something I actually recorded in my dorm. And people just started to sing it all over campus. I thought, this is weird, and I was still recording during that window, but my friends would come back, inebriated at 2:30 and go, you never believe it. They played Cooler Than Me at the party and everyone knew the words. I was like, well, that never happened before, And so thus began sort of my journey to being a professional recording artist. I had already been a recording artist for, maybe close to 8 or 10 years, but nobody really cared. And that's when it became my vocation and my excuse, or my medium through which I've traveled the world and experienced the world.
Very cool. So you
and allowed the world to experience me, So it's a two-way street.
I want to explore that more. I'm going to write that down to come back to it. But I just want to get the kind of chronology of things out there, because I think what I find so interesting about your story, at least again, based on what I've read, it involved a lot of ups and downs. And I think you were quoted in one article being like, I thought I'd record a hit, take my shirt off, and then the rest is kind of history. And it certainly didn't necessarily transpire maybe as you might have initially thought, or maybe exactly as you initially thought. I don't want to put thoughts into your head, or answer these questions for you. But so you have Cooler Than Me, and you signed with RCA. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. So towards the end of my junior year in college, I started taking meetings. All these record labels are flying me out during finals week. I had a meeting with Jay-Z when I was supposed to be writing my sociology paper. And you're correct. I ended up choosing RCA from all my suitors. My single, Cooler Than Me, just sort of exploded. That was my first single, even though I had recorded it in the dorm. Once I signed to the label and we got on the radio, it really exploded. And what ensued was this vast success, beyond my wildest dreams. In fact, I even sort of like leapfrogged Sean professionally. And accompanied with that success was a large degree of disillusionment, because I was a very insecure kid growing up. I always felt like I didn't quite belong. And I remember having this thought at Duke, which was, once I get this record deal, my internal experience of life, of the present moment, will be better. I will feel more comfortable in the center of my own experience, having acquired this external thing. And of course, you don't even need to hear me say it, but of course I went about obtaining the thing, the record deal, and I got it. And I got this notoriety, and I got this attention from the opposite sex, and I got this money, and my experience moment to moment of life was largely unchanged. I felt like pretty much exactly the same. And even though I felt the same, not worse, there was this disillusionment, almost dread, because before that moment, I always had the thing to look forward to. Once I get this, things will be better. And we all have a version of this. I suspect many of our listeners, and even those of us that have had this realization, have new ones crop up. So if you're listening, what is your version? It may not be a record deal, but often we as humans put something in the future to say, hey, once I get that, it'll all be okay. And I didn't have that thing anymore, because I got to the point where it was supposed to all be okay, and it was the same. That really started me on the next chapter, was this darkness, this disillusionment.
When did that darkness start? Like, how quickly did you go from being like, holy shit, I made it, and I know that feeling very clearly. Although if I ever get a record label, I will actually have made it. So I'm going to disagree with you on that one. But that's coming from me, a very different circumstance. But yeah, when did it turn? When did it turn?
Because that would be a prerequisite miracle for you guys.
That's exactly
you
right.
never know. If you reassemble the Gentiles, some magic could happen. It could.
With a name like that, yeah.
Yeah. Geez, I'm not sure. But probably a series of weeks, probably in the 2 to 4 week range, where it's like, hey, this isn't like this. I feel the same, I feel the same. And this was the impetus for my sort of sadhana to begin my spiritual journey, which was, I got to ask this question, at a very young age, which was, if not this, then what? If not material success, money, the notoriety, the fame, etc., then what? What is going to change my moment to moment experience of life? And, it's easy to sit here 10 years later and go, and I just asked the question, but no, I didn't know who I was. And then, of course, not only did was it hard during the successful part, but actually the success was followed very quickly with a period of a failure. You know, the next song I put out didn't replicate the success of Cooler Than Me. And basically a year or two later, I found myself not as the hot new artist anymore, but as the washed up artist. People would call me a one-hit wonder at that time, which I guess by definition I was. I hadn't had my second hit yet, but I was just completely lost. My identity was wrapped up in first being successful and popular, and then I wasn't successful and popular, and I really was sort of struggling and grasping to figure out what's next, what matters to me, what do I had made some money and I had a house, and then just like a completely empty calendar. Like what do I even do now? And that sort of set about like my renewing of my vows to music, and also the birth of my spiritual path as well.
I can only imagine that the shift from being the cool new thing to being the washed up art, one hit wonder, like the bigger they are, the harder they fall. Was that precipitously hard? Because I can imagine that it's like, well, I mean, these days being a parent, my calendar is pretty empty most of the time, but it's kind of like that's kind of the trajectory of the life I was on anyway. So it wasn't such a profound shift from where I was going, but being the hot new thing, to losing that, like I can imagine that must be devastating if you don't have a well-established sense of identity and direction. And listen, I still struggle with it to this day, personally. Not necessarily in a social context, but in how I define myself and success and all that. And so did you find it like incredibly hard, or were you able to just roll with the punches?
It's hard because I can't like compare it to how anyone else would have felt, but yeah, it was marked by also a real inauthenticity, that's a funny turn of phrase, a real inauthenticity, meaning in LA, in the music scene, what I really wanted at the time was to replicate the success. And the success is also addictive in some ways. You start thinking like, there's also another party that goes, well, maybe you just didn't get enough. Maybe if you have more, then you would reach that feeling of security and happiness, etc., fulfillment. And the real authenticity was, in order to try to replicate that, you're going around from studio to studio or taking meetings with labels and acting like this is all part of your plan, sort of. Oh yeah, I'm working on the new thing. I have some big stuff coming, all this stuff. And inside is really this like existential dread that I just didn't really show to anyone. And certainly didn't have the awareness or emotional intelligence to articulate at the time in my early 20s and this kind of thing. So, I think it was a really, a feeling of fear, and a fear to communicate about the fear. So also, I think I walled myself off a lot.
I haven't spent a lot of time in Hollywood, but I get the sense. I mean, I think it's true in like our whole social media, Instagram world, that you're only allowed to show one face of reality, and that's got to be positive and uplifting. Otherwise, you're harshing other people's vibes. And I imagine that's probably particularly pronounced in Los Angeles.
Sure. Ronan, I struggle with that to this day. Is there's this balance, of you think of the law of attraction, and you attract what you think about and what you speak about. And so you have a problem or a challenge. It's called a challenge. And it's like, well, if I pretend like that's not there, you're sort of being fake. But there's also another end of the spectrum where I make a whole identity out of this challenge or this problem and a victim story and this whole thing, and actually perpetuate the problem. And so I think in my 20s, I was way too far on the not communicate and act like it's nothing, not even there. and actually like it kind of festers and metastasizes part of the spectrum. And where you really want to be is sort of in the middle, and so I sort of shifted this way.
So again, just continuing with the chronology. So you go through a bit of a down period, but you rededicate yourself to music, it sounds like. And a couple of your songs, from what I read, got picked up by some big artists. How did that feel? Can you tell the story there?
Sure. So I was still recording music this whole time and actually fell, back in love. I won't say back in love, but just recommitted to music because I sort of had this like Steve Jobs moment where, he got fired from Apple. And it's like, I'm sitting at the house. I've made some money. I'm young. I go from like touring the world, like you said, taking my shirt off at shows, and now the calendar is empty. And I go, what the heck do I do now? And I sort of realized I still love music. And so maybe I have some time now. I don't have to tour. I don't have to travel. Maybe I can use this time to actually get better at it. And so I was always just writing. I took the time to learn how to play instruments because before that I was just making beats and I rapped. But I learned to play the guitar and I learned to play piano and took a lot of singing lessons. And during this time I was recording and I got what we call in the music industry, I was shelved. So I had this record deal still with RCA, but because my sales were so low, they're sort of looking at the charts or the trends of how my music is doing and going, hey, actually to put out his next album will probably cost us more than we're going to make because you have to pay all the producers, the marketing costs, a lot of overhead upfront costs that you hope to make back if the albums sell. And at that time, we're actually selling real CDs still, and
Good old days.
yeah, just the way my singles were trending, I thought, hey, if we pay all those upfront costs, we're probably not going to get that money back. So what happened was I got what we call shelved, which just means like, hey, you can make all the music you want, but we're not going to put it out. And if something crazy happens, some song leaks out and it does well, we still own it. So it's kind of like they're just sitting on an asset, but not using it. And I thought, well, heck, I actually recorded an album called Pages, didn't come out. And I recorded another album I recorded an album called Sky High and then another album called Pages. So I had two albums that actually never came out. And if you look at my discography now, I had an album come out in 2010. And then the next one didn't come out till 2016. And that's really what happened. There were two other albums in there, but they sort of got lost. And occasionally, like I would run into other artists at the studio or just through sort of backward, behind the scenes, like networks in the music industry. Some of my songs would get heard, listened to by other artists. And like in two cases, these artists kind of like begged me to cherry pick one of the songs from these shelved albums and record for their albums. I just figured, heck, like my stuff isn't even coming out. So better off they sing it than it just sit on my laptop forever. And so that is how the song Sugar from Maroon 5 came to be, or, one part of how it came to be. And also how the song Boyfriend for Justin Bieber came to be, as the songs were recorded for my albums and all my albums, but I took them off and gave them to them.
Was that bittersweet? Or was that just like amazing? It's awesome to see someone taking my work and running with it.
It was cool. It was cool to, also have to understand, like, when you have this one moment of success, you're thinking, well, maybe I just got lucky. And that actually does happen in music. I can think of a few artists I won't name because it's kind of mean, but actually they have like this one really amazing song. And sometimes artists, I don't mean popular, but they have like one big hit song and it's actually a very good song, which, are two different parameters, which sometimes can exist in concert, but not always, right? You have a popular song that's not good. You have a good song that's not popular. But you also have a popular song that is good. sometimes you have people that have popular songs that are good, and then you listen to all of their other music, and it's like markedly worse. And it's like, how do you account for that? You know, they had a moment of inspiration or transcendence, and it just came out of, I don't know. But I was thinking, well, maybe I'm one of those guys. You know, maybe I just had this one moment, and I think what I'm doing now is good, but maybe I'm crazy. Maybe I just like it because I made it. I'm biased. Well, then Boyfriend hits, and it's like, okay, now you have two songs that lots of other people like, lots and lots of other people like. So, like, it's probably not luck. It's probably not luck. And then you have the third with Sugar, and it's like, okay, maybe you know what you're doing a little bit, and so those it was just positive for me people always ask, do you wish you kept it for yourself? It's like, I had it for myself, but it was stuck. So it was the obvious choice, and it was awesome. It was awesome, and it's still awesome. I hear those songs, I'll be in the elevator, or I'm traveling, I'm in the gym somewhere, and that one of those songs will come on, and it's so cool, and you look, you go, oh.
That's awesome. At what point did you decide to pick up and move to Utah and live in a van with your guitar? Was that when the inspiration for some of these songs came out, or was that after, your two albums got shelved by RCA?
Geez, I can't remember the exact timeline, but I remember it was after a breakup for sure.
Okay.
And I just sort of felt like bogged down by my own social identity. I thought, why don't I just get the heck out of here and see if I can figure out how to be happy without any of my stuff, without being who I am here, and without all my luxuries that I live with. I just live in this van, grow my beard, and just kind of simplify things. And so I actually do remember I had written this song. I'm kind of skipping ahead in the chronology, as you like to call it. For me, it's like my boring life story. But I remember I had recorded another song called I Took a Pill in Ibiza. And it was really about this whole phenomena. In the popular music scene, we do a really good job of documenting our ascension to success. And you'll hear lots of rappers or artists talking about and very eloquently and poetically and artfully describing their ascension from sometimes destitute circumstances to glory. And some of those stories are very beautiful. But here I thought, like, hey, I had this like ascension to glory, but now I'm actually descending away from glory into anonymity. And I actually don't really hear anyone write about that. And I'm going to try to write about that in a way that's equally artful, poetic, and beautiful. And so that was I Took a Pill in Ibiza. It's about not ascending to glory, but falling away from it and what that was like. Anyway, I put this song out, and I didn't think too much of it other than I was also scared again, because I thought, prior to that point, all my music was very either hip hop or pop, somewhere between those two genres. And here I was putting out essentially a folk song and a folk EP. And I thought, well, however dead my career already is, this is really going to just seal the deal, because if anyone liked my music before, they're probably just going to hate this because it's completely a different genre. In fact, I'd even contemplated just changing my stage name and releasing under a different name. But I thought, hey, so actually this is part of your story. The song's about you. So I put it out, and I was in the van, and I was just not even thinking about anything in terms of my career. And then I got a call like, hey, this song, there's a remix of this song that's number one in Norway. And I thought, that's strange, and then it was number 3 in Sweden, and it just started to spread sort of on its own. And I thought, this is impossibly ironic. Here's a song about me sort of like blowing my shot and it's giving me a second shot, or it's a song about falling away from glory and now it's in some backwards way bringing more glory to my life. So then ensued another sort of career up, and there's lots more, between then and now too, in terms of my story. But I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, Ronan.
I love hearing the story, and also love the vulnerability and authenticity with which you tell it. It really is so beautiful to me, and super fascinating. This is like, we've gotten to a point in our society where I think being an entrepreneur is as glorified as becoming a musician in some ways. There's the cult of the hustle and all that kind of stuff. And in many ways, the experience is very similar, which is, you work your ass off. It sounds like you got, I won't say lucky early, but you got lucky early in it, with Sean, and then getting a hit that led to a record label. So it may have not been the grind that some artists or entrepreneurs put in to
no,
make
because
it
that's
big,
just where
right?
we started. Remember, you said start
That's
at Duke.
true. It is where we started. I know.
It was a lot of work before then too. I started at age 8 actually writing, and so it was a lot of years of just sucking and iterating and not being very good. Anyways, I interrupted you because I think the spirit of what you're saying is true. Whether or not we get the minutia details of my story correct.
No, 100%. And I wanted to acknowledge that, which is like, it wasn't an overnight success. It's like I spent my whole life trying to get ready for the overnight success, right? And in many ways you had. And it's funny, I had a conversation with pastors and a friend, Sanjay Singhal, who quoted, I forget who it was, who said like, the secret to entrepreneurship is staying alive long enough until you get lucky. And in some ways that's true. And then you get that moment. And then you get a lot of the, I guess, dopamine hits that probably go along with being a successful recording artist. Is like, you start being popular, you have money, you get invited to things, people are interested in you that didn't exist before, and then depending on your trajectory, you hit that plateau. And for a lot of the time, it's downward. It's that downward trajectory, and then, much like being a recording artist, if you've got the hustle and the desire and the fortitude and the know-how, you can turn that around, and then you get your second shot. And hopefully with a little bit more wisdom, you go into that second shot, so you don't come out guns blazing, buying the house and living the lifestyle. So that's really my next question. When you got, when you saw I Took a Pill in Ibiza reversed your descent into an ascent, did it feel different? Did you approach it with a new lens, being like, I'm not going to fall into the traps of my first ascent? Or, was it just as much fun and giddy as the first time around?
It was certainly experienced with more gratitude and appreciation for, hey, this is actually kind of a rare thing. So it's okay to enjoy it, and appreciate it. Be grateful for it, because we know it comes after and up now. There's eventually, like, no one stays at number one forever. There hasn't been a song in history that got to number one and just stayed up there. They've all come down. So I remember feeling a greater sense of appreciation and awareness of the rarity of the moment, and an intention to be grateful for it. Now, sort of during the real wave of I Took a Pill in Ibiza's success, this wave was punctuated not by the song really falling down the charts, but actually by my father's diagnosis with glioblastoma, which is cancer of the brain. So, I got a phone call one day when I was in LA, and my mom said, your dad has a tumor in his head the size of a tangerine. They're going to take it out tomorrow. And so I just got on a plane, and I went home, and I essentially moved home while I had this like giant success. And you said in my intro, I got nominated for the Grammy. That's when I got nominated for the Grammy. But I was at home helping my dad transition from life to death. during that time. And he died, I think, about 10 months after we got that diagnosis. And I sort of had this feeling of possibility slash like disillusionment wash over my life again, like sort of a gray malaise, like what's next? And I washed back up on the shores of LA and found myself sort of in recording studios. I made an album, actually really good album in my opinion, maybe my best album. But still, it felt like I had this sense that there was something more. It had to be something more, both inside me and also like my life had to be more. It took me a while, another year. But then a friend of mine, Avicii, who was a wonderful producer and artist, he died. He killed himself. And then I realized, like, hey, I too am going to die one day, hopefully not anytime soon. But before then, I really want to live my life. And I had this dream that I had sort of put on the back burner for years and years, which was to walk across America. And I thought, well, I'm either going to do it or I'm just going to live somebody else's life, And that's when I started to think in a real way, like, I want to do this thing. I actually had a psychedelic experience right before I started the walk. I sat ayahuasca. And it was actually like a really, really challenging period. Like I always say, at no point during that sit was I having fun. One of the big takeaways was, hey, you're sort of living a life you designed 10 years ago when you're 21 and you're 31 now. And while you actually have grown and your values have evolved in an admirable way, your lifestyle hasn't. Like what you're actually doing with your time is the same. And so that needs to change. And I got firm in the intention that I didn't have to live the normal script of an artist's life, which is sort of to make an album, go on tour, make an album, go on tour, make an album, go on tour, go to Vegas, like that wasn't going to be my path and my journey. And there's nothing wrong with that path or journey should it be someone else's path and journey, but it just didn't feel like mine. I thought, well, like I can sort of like make and create music and then go on this adventure. And I actually don't have to like go on tour after I put this album. I can sort of create my own, like pick and choose what I like from the playbook and use it and kind of throw away the rest and create. And so that was really sort of a kick in the butt. It wasn't a gentle nudge or a kind reminder. It was a real kick in the butt. Like you gotta make some changes. And while I already had the intention of going on the walk, it's sort of like the artifice and scaffolding around that whole thing had to get stripped away and rebuilt. And so that journey was in November 2018. And my first step of the walk across America was April 15th, 2019. So I don't know how many months that is, like 4 or 5 months later.
What was your reaction at that moment? Was it fear, anger, sadness, probably a combination? And then the question I'm actually more interested in is how you started the story, which was, you said the artifice and scaffolding of the walk across America had to fall away or change. And I'm curious to know how that changed.
So what I really meant, like the artifice and scaffolding, was not of the walk, but of like my whole life, or the way I thought of myself, the way I related to the world, which was I guess before sort of a lens of like trying to do something everyone's gonna like, trying to get back to that place of success I had been before. Like I just needed to stand at the center of my life and create from there, instead of like trying to take polling data from outside sources and run it back through and back out. It couldn't work that way anymore. So that's really what I meant by that. Like I had to reconstruct what I thought my life was supposed to be. and how it was supposed to work, and the questions that I would ask to even make the decisions on how to come upon the answers of what my life should look like and how it should be lived and what it meant for me to live a meaningful life. So that was really the thing.
I think this is really important. What were those changed questions that you were asking yourself? Because I think that's one of I'll just speak from my personal experience where I was going through the analysis of whether I wanted to do something or not. And it was a really hard question, of like, is this the rest of my life kind of decision? And it's impossible to make those decisions. And so instead, for the first time, I flipped the question. I said, is this thing serving me? And that was a profound shift in the question, because it was like, I can answer that. It's hard to make a decision to know what to do for the rest of your life, but I can answer the question, is this thing serving me right now? And that's an easy question to answer. That doesn't take much thinking at all. You know the answer immediately as soon as you ask that question. But also the shift in asking that question for me, because I've spent a lot of my last 43 and a half years or so struggling with a sense of self-worth and all that kind of stuff. It was actually very profound shifting the question, because asking from the question of, does this serve me, implies that I am deserving of something, which starts to fundamentally undermine that notion of worthlessness. And so I'm really curious to know how your question shifted.
I shifted from intention of comfort to intention of growth, and I sort of like was trying to curate a life. Or maybe my question, without realizing it, was like, how do I make my life more comfortable? So how do I get more attention from others, more money, more fame, more success, and curate this like sandbox so it's exactly perfect and nothing ever bothers me, to how do I make things as uncomfortable as possible? Fuck this sandbox. Like, I'm so tired of living inside here. I'm going to go and do something I don't know how to do that's going to hurt me physically. It's so out of my comfort zone. Challenge me in ways I don't even understand. I know going into this, there's going to be a period where I think this is a horrible idea, and I want to see if I can experience that and still keep going. Decide, yeah, I understand this is horrible and I don't want to do it anymore, but I'm going to do it anyways. Why? Because I said I was. So that was, at that moment, that was sort of the shift I was making, from comfort to discomfort on purpose. And it was everything I ever could have wanted. By the day before I got bit by a rattlesnake, I met this guy who was running across America, and he was going the opposite direction. His name was Stevie. And you can imagine sort of the emotional poignancy of like crossing paths with this man on this road in Colorado. Like, there's two humans. Like, almost nobody knows what he's going through. Almost nobody knows what I'm going through. But we understand each other because we're both like in the middle of this wild journey. If you can imagine that moment of these two humans meeting in the middle, both in the middle of their respective journeys. And one thing that struck me about him, I mean, there's a bunch that struck me about him, but one was, for me, I ain't going east, okay? I walk west. It's like, this is hard enough as it is. Every day I wake up, I can barely stand up. The pain come out of my feet were unimaginable. It's just insane. You can imagine walking 1,797 miles. It's not like you're mixing in, leg day, chest day, pull day. It's like, no, you're going to do the same muscle group 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, every day, day after, mile after mile, day after day. And we stop even counting miles. We're just counting distance by American states. Like, it's just so everything changes, And so, okay, finally there's someone here that gets that. And he walked west with me. I thought, wow, what a guy. Because like, as much as it's good to connect with you, Doug, I'm not going east. I'm not going east. He walked west of me 16 miles the wrong way. Okay, this is a man who's his body's pushed to the limits, right? He has this goal. He's running across America. He's got a big backpack on and he's running 30 or 40 miles a day. He goes, I'm going to put 16 miles on my body that take me further away. So essentially, actually, I'm putting 32 miles on my body, you know? I have to get back. Okay. Like, wow. And then he says to me, he goes, what do you do about music and headphones? You listen to music? I said, you know, I was like somewhat proud. I said, you know, the first 8 miles, which is usually 2.5 hours or so, I walk in silence. I do walking meditation. And I thought that was pretty cool, you know. And I said, what about you? What about you? Do you bring headphones? Or you listen to headphones? He goes, I didn't bring headphones. Wow. He goes, yeah, at first it was like the hardest thing ever to just be alone with my own mind all day, every day. Not 8 miles, not 2 hours, all day, every day. He goes, but after the first like several weeks is the greatest thing I ever did. Best decision I ever made. Because I just found a clarity that I didn't know was there. And so we had this amazing meeting, you know. I can't remember, it was the next day or 2 days later, I was in the hospital. And my legs swelled to like the size of an elephant trunk. You know, I had some crutches and the whole thing. And, you know, I decided, I had a real like option to quit there. Put option in quotations. I had a reason, which was like, I almost could have lost my foot. You know, if I didn't get to the hospital in time, I'd lose a foot or you could die. And if I quit, you know, no one's really going to even consider me a quitter because I got hurt pretty doggone bad. And so what I really have is like the most plush, beautiful, dressed up excuse of all time, you know, is like a lot of times we say like and I think in this space, in some of the like spiritual or new agey circles that I'm a part of, you know, our self-love or self-compassion can actually go too far into weakness and letting ourselves off the hook, you know. So I just remember like, you know, people always say it wasn't meant to be. It is like a lot of times you're saying it wasn't meant to be. What are you really saying? You're really saying I quit. I quit. You know, here I am, like I just got out of the hospital 5 days. I can't walk. And my goal is to walk across America. I have 1,000 miles left. Like if there was ever was a time it wasn't meant to be, this was it. You know, but I decided like, no, I'm gonna make it meant to be. Like I said, I'm going to walk across America. And I thought about this before I left. I said, if I get hurt, I'm gonna go back to the place I got hurt and I'm gonna finish. And so I did the rehab, I did the PT, and everything doctors said, and eventually like I was walking pretty good. And then it was like, well, you go back or not, you know, because even though my leg was better, the only thing waiting for me was blistering foot pain, sweltering heat, snake riddled shoulders of roads, you know, if there was a shoulder, and semi trucks coming way too close to my shoulder. So you can stay here at home and have your nice cuddly use, or you go back to hell and be the man you actually want to become. And I decided I'm going back, you know, I'm going back. This is like exactly what I talked about before I left. It's like, I'm going to feel at some point, I don't want to do this, but that's why I made a commitment. Like, that's why you make commitments in life. If you knew it was going to be easy, or if you knew that at all points you would be enthused about completing the task, you wouldn't even have to make a commitment, right? You would just go do it. It's like, no, I gave my word to this. And this is a crossroads in my life, you know, and become like, go back to the sandbox or go forward to become the person I want to become. And so I went back, and dude, I was scared, you know, it's like I'm having nightmares about snakes and all stuff. But I just went back to this exact spot where it bit me, and I took another step and I kept going. And I sort of made this vow, which was, when I go back, I want to do the rest like Stevie. So I said, you know, like, I'm not going to bring headphones back. I'm not going to ever listen to music or talk on the phone or distract myself in any way. I'm just going to be alone on the roads. And before that, I let people come. Like, fans were allowed to join me. And I shut that down. I said, this is me. And also I said, I'm not going to masturbate or have sex. It's like 1,000 miles. I'm going to just do it like Stevie. And so I kept taking steps. I walked up and over the Rocky Mountains. I walked across Colorado, across Navajo Nation, across Arizona, across California, across Mojave Desert, across LA. And 6 months and 3 days after my first step from the Atlantic Ocean, 2,851 miles later, I dove into the Pacific Ocean.
How'd it feel?
It felt like a beginning, surprisingly. One would expect you'd feel accomplished or like I was finished. And I just felt like, what's next? Give me what's next. I'm ready for what's next. And I called, even though my body was pretty jacked up, like I needed to rest, my feet were hurt. I needed my spirit and my mind to know that this was not the end of anything. This was the beginning of something. And I was also like, I just didn't want to go back to the sandbox. And I could see like, actually the most important part of this journey is like the next day. What do you do? Because I could just see myself just going back to the person I was before the walk. Like it was an intermission. And I didn't want to do that. I wanted to launch off of the walk. So I didn't know exactly what to do next, but I knew I needed to tell my spirit and my mind, we're not done. We're just starting, even though my body needed to rest. So I called this boxing coach I know, and I said, hey man, I need you to meet me at 4:30 tomorrow morning. Because also I get up to walk every day. It was 4 a.m. So I said, I wake up at 4 a.m. tomorrow also. Even though it walks over, I'm going to 4. So he said, okay. And I got up. And like I said, man, I was like the Tin Man, I could barely like move. It was so stiff. Like it was bad, it's bad. And at the time also, you don't know, thankfully I've healed up now, but like at the time I thought, this might be permanent. I don't know what I've done to my feet, my knees, my leg. Like I might feel like this the rest of my life, but I said, I got to let my spirit know this. I'm not. So I went that morning, 4:30. And I hit mitts, I jumped rope, and I sent the loud message to my spirit, like this the beginnings hide themselves in this. It's the beginning. 2 weeks later, I climbed my first mountain, climbed Mount Hood with my friend Colin O'Brady. I started to research Everest, and slowly my dream, I had this dream of climbing Mount Everest, and it started to mutate from a dream into a plan. Well, to everyone else, like, it really seemed like two different journeys. It is really like one thing for me. It's not, I didn't go unpack my bags. It's like I didn't even have a house to go back to. Like I started climbing, and the next year and a half, I climbed basically full time, and I climbed 71 mountains with my coach, Dr. John Kudrowski. In April 2021, we took a plane to Nepal and hiked 6 days to get to Everest Base Camp and looked up at what we hoped would be number 72. It's Mount Everest, the tallest mountain in the world. And pause. Pause.
Dramatic
Ready.
effect.
Yeah. Any questions, kid?
No, listen, I actually love, I love the story. I love how you're telling it. I love the insights that you've shared. At a certain point, music re-entered the picture, or was always happening in parallel to this journey. And I'd love to hear that. But let's talk about actually climbing Everest, and then we can circle back to, the album "A Real Good Kid," and then your most recent one, or at least your most recent track, which is "Not Dead Yet." But let's talk Everest first.
Sure. Everest is, people always say, how long does it take? How long does it take? Well, I had no mountaineering experience, never worn crampons, never held an ice axe. I just knew I didn't want to go there unless I belonged there. I had no interest in going until I was a mountaineer, but I was just a dude who had walked really far. And my first training climb with John, I didn't know how to wear crampons. I was chasing it behind. I didn't know I turned my headlamp on the right color. I was trying to follow his footsteps as he went up, and I noticed that his heels never touched the mountain. He sticks his just the balls of his feet in, and then pushes up as if he's on stairs. And I thought, gee, like, how strong is these guys' calves, you know? And it's like, I couldn't do it. And I was looking up at this ridge line. I thought, well, just get to that ridge line. And I got to the ridge line, and okay, that's when the wind hits you. And it's like 40-mile-an-hour winds. And I didn't know what I was doing. And like, I had way too much stuff in my pack because, you know, you're going out in the winter and you don't want to have not enough. But when you don't know what you don't need, the pack is heavy, and I'm sweating, and the sweat is freezing and cold. Finally, I make it to the summit with John, and I didn't even know I was on the summit of this training climb. And he goes, drink some water. So of course I have the water on the side of my backpack, you know, the little water bottle like pouch on the side of a backpack. Of course, it's where I kept my water, so it's got easy access. So I take it out, and it's, of course, like duh. It's just one water bottle full of ice. So I have no water. I mean, just like mistake after mistake. We're going down the mountain and through this gully, and John's sort of like going and kind of gracefully going through this snow that's kind of coming up to his knees. And it kind of looks like padding, and I'll go, oh, like I'm tired, but at least I know how to just like follow him. And if I fall, and then like I step in this, and instead, boom, instead of sticking to my knee, I sink all the way to my shoulder, and I slam my knee on a rock. And he goes, oh, dude, that's trapdoor snow. Be careful of that. You know, like it's not all even. And it's just like, okay, I realized like I don't know anything. I don't know what I like. Yeah, I walked across America, but this is like. I have to start from zero. Walk across America was 6 months. This is going to take me a year and a half, triple that, just to get there before I even go. Yeah. So all I have to say, the expedition was 2 months long, but is really like 18 months long journey for me. I got there, and it's COVID. So it was very strange times. Like we didn't even know if we'd be able to go. One side of Everest was closed. There were teams that would have outbreaks and they would leave, and it was just a lot going on in regards to that. And it's just a mind game because you sit in base camp is at 17,300 feet. Okay, that's very high. The tallest mountain in the continental United States is 14,400 or something like that. It's Mount Whitney. So they're 3,000 feet higher than the summit of Mount Whitney is base camp. And what I can't explain to you is the paralyzing, demoralizing, body crippling, oxygen depriving effect that the altitude has. And the effect compounds over time. Everybody's body's different. But for me, the longer I was there, like you sort of acclimatize a little bit to base camp, 17,000 feet. But at the same time, there's parts of you that are just falling apart and they're getting weaker and weaker and weaker. And we're just waiting for our shot for the weather. When every morning we get meteorology reports from some of the best meteorologists, and we look at them, study them, and we try to make decisions about when the best time to go is. And other teams are different people. They make different decisions. It's uncomfortable just to be alive there. Human body is not really meant to hang out. There's no permanent settlements at 17,000 feet in the whole world. Okay, and there's a reason for that. But we're going to stay here for a few months, you know. And so it doesn't feel good. And so these other teams, you know, to make different decisions with the weather, they go up. And most of them, you know, they go up, they're successful. They come down. And what you feel when they come down is jealousy, actually, because you want to go home. You feel bad. You say, well, they're already done, man. They get to go home. And at the same time, there's a small percentage of people that went up before us, and they didn't come down at all. They died in the mountain. And instead of feeling jealousy, a feeling of like, what am I doing here? You have to really grapple with that. Really grapple with your why. And if you don't have a why, one good why. For me, before I left, I had like 4 whys. One was like, hey, I want to explore my potential, see how tough I am, you know, become somebody I'm proud of. Okay. Number 1, I want to do it, which is a bad reason. I knew that before I left, it's a bad reason. It's like, I want to be a guy who climb Everest. That's not more than 50%, but it's in there, you know, And so let's be honest about it. And then I gave my word to it. Now, over time, reason number one, which is I want to explore my potential and myself. This is normally a good thing within certain parameters. But as you get further up the mountain and you see dead bodies, people that were alive 2 weeks ago doing the thing you're doing are now dead. Actually, this reason is like kind of falls apart of self-exploration, actually just becomes selfish, because while it is a good thing to do to explore oneself and your potential and push your limits, it's actually kind of a stupid thing to die for, right? There's things that I would argue that are worthy to die for. One's family, like my mom's another, like protecting my mom, it's like, that's a good reason to die, hopefully that never has to happen, but that would we could argue on a moral basis would probably be a moral reason. Most of us would say, yeah, that'd be something worth dying for. But to explore your own toughness, I don't think that really makes the cut, So that's a good thing to explore in certain parameters, but at its extreme, kind of becomes silly. So that reason fell away. That's the reason number one. Second reason was I want to be a guy who climbs Everest. I already knew before I left that was a bad reason. All right, so that reason's out. So now I'm left with just one why. It's the one you wouldn't expect, which is I'm at Camp 2. An avalanche almost hit our tent last night. I'm the worst I ever felt, and I'm only at Camp 2. There's 4 camps before the summit. This is incredibly dangerous. All these things are pulling me downwards. They're all reasons for me to go down the mountain. And the only thing left was I said I was going to do it. I gave my word to this. I committed to it. Right or wrong, I'm going to honor it. It was the only why that stood up. The only thing that was pulling me upwards instead of down. And so I went to Camp 3. I went to Camp 4. We could talk about psychedelic experiences. I had a psychedelic experience at Camp 4 with no medicine necessary, bro. Yeah. I got to Camp 4 and you get there at about 11. So imagine like each of these days like a marathon. From base camp to 2 to 3, 3 to 4. It's like imagine a marathon, and you can't stop. Like if you run the New York Marathon, you want to quit. Like take the subway home. Like this, you quit, you die, right? Like no one's there to take you down. Once you get above 2, if you don't get yourself down, you don't come down. Period. That's what makes it so dangerous. It's like a small thing, you twist the ankle, break your knee or something like that. Like that's pretty much death. More commonly, just exhaustion. I forgot what I was talking about. Oh, Camp 4. So I'm at Camp. So I get to Camp 4 and imagine like this is after 2 to 3. This is after like 3 marathons, but with no oxygen. And you get there at 10 a.m. and we're gonna start getting ready at 6 p.m. to leave again. So it's not like you're sleeping between the marathons either. Like so, it's just crazy. The level of fatigue is nuts. And I was just sitting there in that window at Camp 4. I got there at 10 or 11. I had till 6 and just try to rest for a little bit for like this moment that I've been training for a year and a half. Like this is it finally. And I closed my eyes to rest and I just started seeing like lattice work and geometry and all these colors and just this feeling of well-being kind of washed over me. Like it's all going to be okay. And like, I remember the feeling contextualized what I was doing because it was so in it. Like it was everything to me. This experience, this psychedelic experience, we call it that. Like it zoomed out. It was like, man, this is just a thing you're doing. And it's not you. And it actually like doesn't really matter that much if you make it or not. You're probably going to, but just go and do it. And like actually there's, this is like one small part of your life. And it was like kind of with that feeling that I started the summit push, and 8 hours later at 4:35 a.m. My team, Dawador J. Sherpa, Dawa Chiring Sherpa, rest in peace. He recently passed away, unfortunately, this year. And Dr. John Kajowski, we made the summit of Everest, and it is one of the most beautiful, if not the most beautiful moment of my life. I can't tell if it's the most beautiful because I often find myself talking about it because people are curious and I oblige them. But it's definitely one of the most beautiful moments of my life.
That's awesome. Kudos for surviving.
Thank you. And that's only halfway, but so more importantly, we got down safe.
Got down, yeah.
And I remember thinking, man, I said this to I was like, yo, man, people in LA, they always want to do ayahuasca or something. I said, you go up here, man, this will change your life real quick, man. I was like, you want to talk? I just felt like, yeah, talk about a journey, both external, or talk about an external journey, creating an internal journey. It really had that effect on me. That's what I first compared it to. Was sitting ayahuasca. It was like that. Indifferent in all the obvious ways, but very similar in terms of the internal change it created.
And how has this experience changed the trajectory since then? What was next after that? Because in many ways, I could see that having the same traps as success as a musician or as an entrepreneur, which is you hit a peak, literally and figuratively, and then what? So, how did you navigate that?
Yeah, man. So it's a great question, and actually, it changed me in all unexpected ways. Which was, I thought I would feel proud, and it would be motivation for me to launch into my next thing. Maybe more dangerous, more crazy. It wasn't like that at all. The actual effect it had on me was a reminder of how beautiful it is to just be here, just be alive. So people often ask me, what's next? And of course, that's like, if we change the context of that question, it's like the worst question ever we can ask as humans trying to be present on our journey. There is no next. There's only here, right? And I'm not trying to sidestep the question, but this actually was how the mountain experience affected me, which was, there is no next, Mike. There is only here. And look, like you rolled the dice right there. And luckily, you're still alive. And what my intention was, if we could call this what my next thing was to be more here, to be more present, enjoy this. And do I still have external goals? Absolutely. I have financial goals, I have musical goals, I have health goals, I have all sorts of goals that I'm working towards. But as our mutual friend Joe says, it's like these goals are just like little games that you move the ball on the field a little bit each day, but that's it. They're games. And do I forget it? Yep, all the time. But really, my intention is to be here, and to be an invitation for others to be here, for us to join one another in presence. And I try to do that in my music. And so recommitted to my music right now. It's not it was always going in parallel, like you said, during these adventures. It wasn't the main thing. Now it's sort of like the main thing I work on. And I have a sort of beautiful job where if I do it well, actually I can invite people into presence through that as well, whether I'm playing it live or through the actual recordings. And so that's sort of what I'm up to.
That's awesome. I wish I had something more eloquent to say about that, but I listen. I love that, and this is a podcast ostensibly about psychedelics, and besides one reference to ayahuasca and a oxygen deprived trip, this has been the most psychedelic conversation in the purest, most elegant, eloquent way that I think I've ever had, because your story right here that you've expressed so beautifully, to me, is the psychedelic journey. It's not about the drugs. It's not about the trips. It's not about how often you do it. It's about every step you take and every decision that you make, and having the awareness and presence to be conscious of that, and tapping into those things outside of us that in our modern Western digital scientific world, we forget about almost every day. And psychedelics are a great reminder of that. But you don't need the drugs for it. It's always there. You, as your story and your experiences have shown us, is that we just got to wake up to it, and we forget, but then we wake up again and keep on it. And I think you've done a great job of being in it more than a lot of people. So I listened to your story with awe, with envy in a positive way. And I don't really have any other questions. It's like this is it. This is exactly it, for lack of a better term. So I'm going to stop there and just say thank you, man. This has been so beautiful. Thank you for sharing it so elegantly. And I guess if there's any invitation that you would want to make to anybody listening right now, this is a great opportunity to do so. Besides, obviously, checking out Not Dead Yet, which I really appreciate the video. But anything else that you'd like to share, please do. Otherwise, I'll just thank you for your time.
Invitation. I think if someone's made it this far into our chat, they're probably in a space where it's safe to ask them the following, which I would ask, like, we'll just take 3 breaths together. I would ask you, close your eyes, and we'll take 1 breath in gratitude for where we are and who we're with. So we'll take that breath now to breathe in and feel the gratitude for where you are and who you're with. Let it go. And let's take a second breath of gratitude for the journey that brought us to this moment. So inhale and let go. And let's take 1 final breath for ourselves. Gratitude for ourselves. Breathing in, letting go. And Posner is out.
That was amazing, Mike. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it. There's a song whose lyrics are as follows. This is what a sad song sounds like. It's been playing in my head for my whole life. It's beautiful and cruel at the same time. And this is what a broken heart beats like. It's tearing up my chest like a jackknife. But it gets me through the good and the bad times. Given the subject of this interview, I'm sure it comes as no surprise that these lyrics are from Mike Posner's latest song, Not Dead Yet. But beyond being a shameless promote from this newfound fanboy of Mike's, I actually find the lyrics particularly meaningful because, like Mike, they represent one of the most important conversations I feel like society isn't having these days, and that is the multidimensional, infinitely textured, exceedingly complex thing that this existence actually is. Songs can be beautiful and cruel. Your heart can be the source of indescribable pain, yet you can love it for getting you through the good and bad times. You can have empathy for people and still believe in progress. You can have your career skyrocket only to crash, only to skyrocket again and come out the other side more level than you went in the first time. This is the psychedelic journey. This is what it's all about. It's about allowing everything that there is to allow into your life and using it as a guide to help you find out who you are and what you're doing. Yes, this may sound like metaphysical mumbo jumbo. I get that, but I'd swear on everything that I find to be good and holy that this is it. This is the journey that we are all on. And I have to say, I've met very few people who can so deftly and poetically and thoughtfully articulate and express it. So, speaking personally, I'm genuinely grateful that Mike is not dead yet, and I hope you are as well. Thank you for listening. As a quick reminder, please follow, rate, and review Field Tripping wherever you get your podcasts, and sign up for our newsletter at fieldtriphealth.com/podcast. Thank you for listening to Field Tripping. I'm your host, Ronan Levy. Until next time, stay curious, breathe properly, and remember, every day is a field trip if you let it be one. Field Tripping is created by Ronan Levy. Our producer is Conrad Page, and associate producer is Macy Baker. Thanks to our production team at Legacy Media, and of course, big thanks to Mike Posner for joining us today. To keep up with his whereabouts and to listen to his music, click the link in the description. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. Click the subscribe button to my left to never miss a release, and click here to check out past episodes. See you next week.